Hey there, Marvelous Joe at the top of the episode to remind you that if you enjoy this show, there's plenty more to enjoy beyond the podcast with bonus content and perks for our patrons on patreon.com/dynamicduel. In our $2 a month tier, that's right, just $2, you get access to over 20 blooper clips, 5 Marvel and DC movie pitches Jonathan and I wrote, 5 top 10 lists, and 5 short animations of duels of characters outside Marvel and DC, like Terminator vs. RoboCop. At $10 a month, you get that bonus content plus the benefit of requesting custom duels from us, where Johnny DC and I run 1,000 Monte Carlo simulations on any 2 characters of your choosing and deliver you the results. And in our highest tier, for $18 a month, in addition to everything the lower tiers get, we name you as an executive producer of this show, where your name gets listed in our show credits and you help us determine what our upcoming episodes will be. So there are a lot of fun extras to enjoy as a patron of this show, and above all else, you will be helping support Dynamic Duel to ensure Jonathan and I get to keep creating episodes for you, the listener. Visit patreon.com/dynamicduel or click the link in our show notes. On with the show! Hi, welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm his twin brother, Johnny DC.
And in this episode, we will be reviewing Superman the movie. And it's about damn time. We had a hole in our schedule, and we knew we wanted to fill it in with a review, and Superman the movie is one of the best superhero films of all time. I'm surprised we haven't reviewed it yet.
I can think of no better way to start off this new decade than by watching this film. It's so inspirational and hopeful, and just one of the pinnacles of the genre. It's almost 50 years old now, but it still holds up.
Oh wow, that's right, yeah. Yeah, it's one of the oldest superhero movies, but it's also definitely one of the most influential. So look forward to that review later on this episode. Before we talk about Superman, we're going to go over the comic book movie news that occurred within the past week. And that is the Golden Globes results. Joker won a few awards.
Best Actor and Best Original Score.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the new Mutants trailer.
The new Mutants? Who are they?
And finally, we're going to talk about how WandaVision was moved from spring 2021 to later this year.
As always, our segment times are in our episode description, so feel free to jump around in the episode to whatever topic you want to hear about.
We want to thank Draco Tempili and Kels McFly for leaving us reviews on iTunes. Thanks a lot, guys. Leaving us reviews and ratings really helps spread word of the show. So whatever platform you guys are listening to us on, please let your fellow podcast listeners know what you think of the show.
Only 2 more months until we get to apply for Rotten Tomatoes.
But now that that's done,
quick to the No Prize. So a No Prize is an award that Marvel used to give out up until the 90s to fans. Our version of the Dynamic Duel No Prize is a digital award that we post on social media that I personally draw for those who we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week's question wasn't tied into any news, but it was rather a bit of market research on our behalf, where we asked you guys how you discovered our podcast. And I wasn't too surprised by many of the answers. It seems like a lot of people are switching over to Spotify to listen to podcasts nowadays. And Spotify must have our back because they're recommending us for a lot of comic book related shows.
Yeah, and a few people said that they heard about us from word of mouth from their friends.
Yeah, that's what I love to hear.
Yes, that's what I was looking for. If you guys aren't spreading the gospel of Dynamic Duel,
go forth. Convert all your friends and family.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
So there was no real winner to choose from among the answers. We're just grateful for all that you guys were able to help us out with. So we want to give the No Prize to everyone that answered. So Jonathan will still be drawing artwork for this episode that you can see on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and it'll be going to all of you who helped us.
Oh, I don't even know who I'm drawing. You know, I never drew Super Skrull. I've always wanted to draw him from all the way back when we did that episode.
Oh, Metamorph over Super Skrull?
Yeah, I'll go with him.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd like to see him. So look forward to that, listeners, and look forward to later on this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week. With that out of the way,
on to the news. Okay, so at the Golden Globes Awards earlier this week, the Joker took home 2 awards.
But not Best Picture nor Best Director.
No. unfortunately. But it did win Best Actor in a Drama for Joaquin Phoenix and Best Score for Hildur Guðnadóttir.
Both of those really well deserved.
Yeah, the film went into the awards show with 4 nominations. It lost the Director Award for Todd Phillips, and it lost the Best Drama Picture.
Right. Usually the Best Director award goes to the Best Picture winner, which in this case was 1917, directed by Sam Mendes.
Yeah, fuck that movie. I'm not going to see it now.
It looks pretty good.
I'm bitter as hell. So that's unfortunate, but honestly, I'm still pretty excited by this because it actually has taken home more Golden Globes than any other comic book film in the history of comic book films.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, even Black Panther?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And on top of that, both of the awards are kind of special in that Hildur is the first woman to take home a Golden Globe for Best Score on her own without sharing the award with a male counterpart.
Oh, interesting.
And Joaquin Phoenix's win makes him the second actor to win for the Joker role.
Oh, because Heath Ledger won too.
Yeah, posthumously. After Joaquin Phoenix won the award, I guess he was trying to bypass the press room.
Yeah.
But he was tricked into going in there. And he was like, "God damn it, they tricked me." And when they were asking him questions like, "What did you do to get into the role for the Joker?" He was like, "Isn't this old news? I feel like I've answered this question a year ago." He was being kind of sassy.
His speech was a little weird too.
Yeah, he started off by saying there was no fucking Best Actor. He was bleeped right away. He was bleeped several more times during his speech. He was essentially just saying, it was great that they were given a vegan meal and that the other actors should stop using their private jets and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think he meant well, but he's so awkward.
He's very
his
awkward.
Delivery was just a little off.
But that's what makes him a great Joker.
Yeah, probably.
Going into the awards, I was kind of surprised that Endgame wasn't nominated for anything. How does that feel?
We're not talking about Endgame. We're talking about Joker. I'm sure Endgame will pick up some of them Oscars. Yeah, I'm really surprised Endgame didn't get nominated for anything. Well, Golden Globes doesn't do best visual effects or technical awards like that, right?
No. Not during the main ceremony, at least. So I guess, we all know which film the Hollywood Foreign Press preferred this year, comic book wise.
Maybe, but also, who cares? We'll continue this debate when the Oscar nominations are announced.
And that's coming up soon, I think.
Yeah, I think it's going to be this upcoming week.
Oh man, I'm excited. Stay tuned.
In other news, we just got the new Mutants trailer. This is the second trailer that's come out from the film. We haven't heard anything about this movie for quite a while now. Rumors were saying that Fox was hoping to do a lot of reshoots for the movie, and that was basically the last thing we ever heard ever since the movie was moved to April 3rd of this year, up until last week, when all of a sudden, New Mutants is back on track, and Josh Boone, the director, is posting about it, saying that this is his original vision of the film and that Disney would not be proceeding with any new reshoots.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. I mean, it's a win-win for Disney, really, if you think about it. Because if the film succeeds, then Disney will make a lot of money, and they'll be praised for not tampering the director's original vision. If the film does not succeed, they have deniability in that they could say, this wasn't our project. We didn't touch this.
And they're not invested in the storyline.
Right. They're not going to put more money into a movie that's potentially not going to do well. So, of course, they're not going to move forward with reshoots. All in all, though, I think that this is best for the film because usually, even if a movie isn't very good, if it's still a singular, unified vision, it usually communicates well to at least a subsection of society and becomes like a cult sort of film. And I think at worst, that's what this film looks like, because it actually looks damn good.
It actually has me excited to see it.
Yeah? It's not often that we get superhero films that are in the horror genre.
No.
There have only been a few instances, like perhaps the Blade movies and Constantine. But this looks more rooted in horror than almost any other superhero film I've seen.
It looks like straight horror. I remember for the first trailer, you kind of criticized it for borrowing from a lot of other horror films.
Yeah.
Did you think that this time?
Not so much, because we're actually seeing a lot more of who these characters are and what their powers are, and so it feels very different to me now.
The concept that the trailer sets up is kind of interesting. They're in a hospital that almost seems to be psychically attacking them.
Well, yes, it appears that this is a case of Mirage's powers manifesting themselves. No one knows what her powers are, but in the comics, she's an illusion caster. And so it appears that because of the trauma that she suffered, where her family was attacked and killed by the demon bear, that the trauma is manifesting as her psychically reproducing other people's fears.
What a great concept.
Isn't it, though? It almost creates this haunted house effect, given that these teens don't know, and she doesn't know, what her powers are.
But it still makes sense story-wise within an X-Men universe.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty damn awesome. I think Josh Boone brought a lot of great ideas to this movie, and hopefully it turns out really well. The trailer itself is very dark. Like, a lot of the shots were hard to see. I had to turn up the brightness on my phone all the way, and then you can kind of make out what's going on. I think it's purposefully dark, not only to add to the atmosphere, but also maybe to cover up some of the special effects that aren't as polished due to the fact that this is a lower budget film.
But you could get away with that in a horror film.
Yeah, you totally can. So Danny Moonstar, aka Mirage, she lands up in the hospital. We see Dr. Cecilia Reyes taking care of her. Now, in the comics, Cecilia Reyes was black, and she wasn't a bad guy, but here she appears to be. But she has the ability to create force fields in the comics. And I'm wondering if they're kind of adapting that so that she is actually the one using her powers to put a force field around the hospital. I'm guessing she's not nearly the villain that this trailer is trying to portray her to be.
Yeah, it's like a red herring vibe I get.
Yeah, I think she's actually trying to protect society from the kids as opposed to, imprison the kids. Although you never know. Like, there might be some sinister force behind this. It was also rumored that Antonio Banderas was supposed to be in this movie playing Sinister, and this might be his hospital. It's all still unclear. I really love the scene where they go to the support group to talk about their trauma, and all the other members of the New Mutants start discussing their first incidences where their mutant abilities manifested. And we have Rain, played by Maisie Williams, who's just perfect for this role, I think.
Yeah.
We don't actually see her turn into Wolfsbane, into a werewolf, but we see the start of it.
Yeah, we see like her eyes darken and her sideburns kind of grow a little bit longer.
Yeah. She has a great look, doesn't she?
She does. She has a really good look.
She really does. We see Sam Guthrie, who is Cannonball. He has the ability to propel himself through the air while projecting a force field around his body, and he could just blast through things like a human cannonball. Here, they sort of change the powers up a bit so that it doesn't envelope his entire body, but it looks like he can charge any part of his being with that kinetic energy.
Maybe it just takes practice. The look of his muscles twitching and rippling in the mirror, that was kind of horrifying.
Yeah. But I thought the effect later on in the movie where he activates his arms with the cannonball power.
Yeah.
I thought that looked pretty damn cool. We at least, though, need to see him one time cover his entire body with it and fly. Because that's his whole thing.
Yeah.
He is the human cannonball. He needs to do that. That being said, I'm not displeased with how they chose to use it, considering that he's still learning how to use his powers and they're in a smaller space that's too confining for that type of ability. An ability that's that destructive,
Yeah. Sunspot looked a lot like Sunspot.
He kind of looked a lot more like the Human Torch to me. Now,
but he was dark.
For a second. Well, it was kind of both, right? Like when we first see Sunspot activating his powers, he's lit up like the sun. He looks kind of like how he did in Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
But then the flame goes out and he's dark, and that's when he uses his strength power to knock that pillar down. If you guys listen to our Starfire versus Sunspot episode, you know that Sunspot's powers are photosynthesis. He absorbs light and converts it into strength. And when he activates his powers, his body absorbs all the ambient light around him, so he looks like a shadow. He's not really supposed to look like he's on fire. But he still does have some fire powers in the comics in that he can emit the solar radiation that he absorbs. And in this case, it manifested for the first time with him burning his girlfriend. And if you guys remember from our duel, his first girlfriend did die. Very faithful to the comics, it seems, so far.
Yeah.
Not in that, they all met in a hospital. Obviously, they were all recruited by Professor X in the comics. But at least there's a lot of elements that are faithful to the comics. We see Magic, lastly, who is Colossus' sister, Ilyana Rasputin.
And I love the contrast of attitudes here. Everyone's really ashamed and kind of traumatized by their first time using their power. But she seems to kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, she's a badass. I mean, there's very little that phases Ilyana. She is the ruler of Limbo, after all. Probably not here by this point, but in the comics, she's become the ruler of Limbo. But she sees nightmarish things all the time when she traverses through Limbo. That's her power, is she can teleport through that dimension. And we'll have a dual episode with her later on this year before this film comes out, where we're pitting her against the Enchantress from Suicide Squad. But her power essentially is to teleport using these teleportation discs that transport her to Limbo, where she can then therefore transport to anywhere else. But at one point in her life, she was stuck in Limbo, she was captured, and she was taught how to be a sorceress. And that's where she got her soul sword from. which we see in this trailer, which looks badass.
It does look really cool. It's like a badass lightsaber.
Yeah, and she got the Eldritch armor down her arm to go with it and everything. It's so cool. She's so cool. I can't wait to do a dual episode with magic.
That was like the first thing I thought when I saw this trailer. I was like, I cannot wait for that dual episode.
Yeah, I wish we could get to all of the New Mutants before this movie actually comes out, because so far we've only done Sunspot. But we'll see how many we can squeeze in before the movie actually comes out, because it's not far away. It's only a few months away, and we have, Birds of Prey to get through and other stuff. So, yeah, we'll see.
Is that the demon bear at the end?
Yeah, it is. We only get a brief glimpse of him, but he looks fairly faithful to Bill Sienkiewicz's original art in the New Mutants comics. It looks like horrifying.
The red eyes.
Just red eyes and teeth, for the most part, is initially all that you get to see of it. And I'm wondering if, like in the comics, it actually is a demonic entity that's going after Mirage, or if it's just a manifestation of her own psychic illusion casting.
That would be like so M. Night Shyamalan if at the end it's like, oh, it was all an illusion.
It was all a twist.
That could be really good or really bad.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Overall, what I'm taking away from this trailer is that it seems like it's perfectly cast. But I've known that for a while.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of sad that this might be Anya Taylor-Joy's only turn as Magic.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate, because I doubt that the MCU would bring this story into their universe, because it's just not the MCU style,
Right.
It's not really the X-Men style either. It's kind of its own thing, which is kind of what makes it special. I just hope that the film ends up being good. I have to say that this trailer gets me a lot more excited for it than I was previously, because I'm also just a huge horror genre movie fan.
Not me. I hate horror. Like, I hate it.
It's a lot of fun to watch these movies. I would love to get like a truly, really scary superhero film, because that's what you've always kind of wanted to see in a horror film, right? In horror movies, the protagonists are often beset by these supernatural or dark, sinister forces, and you just wish that they had superpowers to fight back.
That's true. That is true. I mean, this can't be too dark. It's PG-13.
Yeah. I mean, there are some fairly decent PG-13 horror films out there. Like The Ring was PG-13.
Was it?
Yeah. So they could get fairly dark with it. We'll see how dark they get when the movie comes out. I'm expecting at least one more trailer for this within the coming months. So yeah, really happy to see the direction this is going, and glad they're still releasing it in theaters.
There's a lot of great movies to look forward to this year. And that brings us to our question of the week. Which 2020 Marvel or DC theatrical film, either Birds of Prey, New Mutants, Black Widow, Wonder Woman 1984, Morbius, Venom 2, or The Eternals, are you looking forward to the most this year? Post your answer to our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or email us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com. We'll pick our favorite answer and draw that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to social media.
And the last bit of news is just a quick bit of news. We learned in a Disney Plus promotional video that WandaVision is going to premiere in 2020 as opposed to spring 2021 as we were initially told. Which is fantastic news, because that means that we're going to get 2 Disney Plus Marvel shows this year with WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I was kind of thinking that next year seemed a little dense as far as these releases were going. Now you can kind of spread that out a little bit more. So you have Loki coming out in the beginning of 2021, What If coming out in the middle of 2021, and then Hawkeye coming out at the end of 2021. Because initially Loki and WandaVision were going to come out at almost around the same time. So this spreads things out nicely. That also makes me think that we're going to get Falcon and the Winter Soldier a few months earlier than we initially would have.
I forget how many episodes each one is going to be.
6 episodes.
Okay, that's right. It's kind of nice for us, at least, because it gives us ample time to review each show. I think it would be a little bit harder on the schedule if Loki was coming out at the same time as WandaVision.
Right, yeah. And we just get to see Doctor Strange that much sooner, because as we know, Doctor Strange is going to make an appearance in WandaVision, and that show is going to lead into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
There's also a rumor that Quicksilver is going to appear.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, she can create any reality that she wants to using her powers and sorcery. I don't know if Quicksilver is actually coming back from the dead, or if he's just going to be an illusion of that reality that she's creating.
I hope they bring him back. That was kind of dumb how they killed him.
Well, I think also I heard that Scarlet Witch's kids are going to be in this, and they grow up to be Speed and Wiccan, who are 2 Young Avengers members. So there's going to be a ton of great characters in this show. Really can't wait for it. But I think that does it for all the news for this episode, so let's go ahead and get into the main event, where we review one of the greatest superhero movies of all time, Superman the movie.
Okay, Superman the movie was directed by Richard Donner and was released in 1978. It's not the first superhero film, especially if you're considering like old movie serials and the Batman movie that was based on the 60s TV show.
Oh yeah, with Adam West.
Right. But I would say that this is probably the most important superhero film.
In its influence on the genre, yeah, for sure.
I mean, it created the genre.
Yeah, and it also was the first to take an earnest approach to the source material. They were all about verisimilitude behind the scenes.
Which is like authenticity, right?
Yes.
I mean, the film can get pretty campy at times, and it kind of falls apart thematically at the climax, but visually, the film is iconic. It's just gorgeous. And its ensemble cast is memorable, especially in regards to Marlon Brando as Jor-El, and of course, Christopher Reeve as Superman. Before we dive into this, spoiler warning for anyone who has not seen it yet. If you have not seen it yet.
If you have not seen this movie yet, 1, feel shame. And then 2, see this movie because it's just a beautiful, wonderful film.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yeah. I mean, and there's multiple versions of it you can see. The one that we watched recently for this review was the special edition, which is the one that I would recommend. It was one that was restored by Richard Donner himself to correct some of the special effects and add some new scenes in that were cut for the theatrical release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're really well done too.
Yeah. I think they're really important scenes. Don't watch the extended cut. It's pointless. You could just go ahead and skip that one. Again, the special edition is where it's at. So you just mentioned the word verisimilitude, and I think that was carried throughout the production of the film, all the way up to the slogan of it, which was, "You'll believe that a man can fly."
Right.
And for a lot of audiences at the time, it totally did. Verisimilitude is an approach that I think has led to the success of, you could argue, the MCU and other DC films like Wonder Woman. You know, I know on set for the Wonder Woman film, there was a big, like, we're not allowed to say any of this is cheesy kind of vibe. If you look at the MCU, they absolutely love their comic books. They absolutely love the source material, and they absolutely take it seriously.
Right, you have to treat the source material with respect and approach it as the fans do. And fans, as much as we know that this stuff isn't real, we want it to be. And as fantastical as the elements are, if you take away the believability of them, you lose your fan base.
I think that the serious nature of this film could be credited largely in part to Mario Puzo, who was the screenwriter. If you're not familiar with Mario Puzo, he also wrote The Godfather.
One of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons that actually Marlon Brando signed up for this film, because of Mario Puzo's involvement. He's a fantastic writer, really knows character. So Mario Puzo wrote 2 Superman films, actually, and both of them were shot simultaneously. It was Superman the movie and Superman 2. Richard Donner shot 75% of part 2, but he sort of famously clashed with the producers over like the expanding budget, and they decided to halt production of the sequel and just finish the first film. And because of that, I think part of the story gets botched thematically in this film. But despite that, they were still able to salvage a good enough film that it was nominated for several Academy Awards: Best Editing, Best Original Score, Best Sound, and it won for Best Visual Effects. The score of the film, which was done by John Williams, won a Grammy for Best Soundtrack.
The score is amazing. It's so iconic. It is the best superhero score of all time. And as much as you want to say that Hans Zimmer's Man of Steel score beats John Williams, now that I'm watching this movie again, I had to disagree. For a large part of this movie, especially during the opening credits, and also the scene where Jor-El's talking to Superman about his role as a superpowered being at the end of the first act. Both of those scenes reminded me of something that was similar to like Fantasia, where there's not really much going on, but you're so caught up in the music.
It's almost like 2001: A Space Odyssey, except that music, wasn't written for that movie.
Right. Yeah, exactly. This was just like this beautiful audiovisual experience. And I actually think it's Williams' best work out of all the other iconic pieces that he's done between Star Wars and Indiana Jones and everything else. This, I think, hit the mark of what it was supposed to be the most. It's heroic, it's uplifting, it's hopeful, it's whimsical.
It's perfect. It's absolute perfection. I know John Williams, as a composer, is pretty inspired by Joseph Campbell, who developed the monomyth. And this score sounds like mythical, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Which ties in pretty well with the themes of Superman, which, there are a lot of Moses parallels, a lot of Jesus parallels, pretty blatantly.
And I think that was introduced with this film, right? Where you have the line by Jor-El where he's talking about how he sent his only son to save and inspire mankind.
Now, I know Richard Donner got like a ton of death threats for acknowledging like the Jesus parallels here, but that was actually at the behest of the producers.
Oh, really?
Who wanted to create something, almost biblical in proportions. Whether it's Jor-El casting out Zod like Lucifer, or the intentionally Star of David type spacecraft that Kal-El was sent to Earth in. There's not only story, but also visual like through lines there. And they've always kind of been there for the character. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who created Superman in comics, were both Jewish, and I think they intentionally added those like Moses metaphors on purpose. Not that the whole film feels like this like preachy biblical story kind of thing.
Yeah, it has heavy themes, but it knows how to be lighthearted about things.
I mean, it starts off as a sci-fi, and then it moves into a drama, and then by the time we get to Metropolis, like an hour into the film, it's a comedy adventure.
Yeah.
And I love films like this, how they're able to like weave in between genres. It's a challenging thing to do. This movie pulled it off seamlessly.
Yeah, without feeling disjointed.
Exactly. And I love the sci-fi world they built here. I love Krypton. As much as I love like the Man of Steel version, this is my favorite Krypton. It's just so crystalline and pristine and cold. It's so scientific. It's completely otherworldly.
It felt very like heavenly and very like holier than thou kind of.
Even down to like the clothes they were wearing.
Right.
Those were awesome. I guess they were made of like completely like almost like reflective glass kind of material. I don't think I've ever seen anything in a film like that since.
Yeah, it was a really cool choice on behalf of the costume designer. There's so many things in this movie that impresses me for the era in which it was made.
I think to this day, Richard Donner has said in interviews that he's still cursing the Academy Awards for not nominating this film for set production.
That's a travesty. So much of this movie blew my mind that I think that if I personally would have watched it when it came out in 1978, I would have like ran screaming out of the theater and just beat the shit out of the first person I saw.
What?
It would have blown my mind.
It would have made you a DC fan?
No.
Don't lie.
I would have been heavy into Spider-Man at the time. But I still would have been impressed with the visuals of this film.
By the time we get to Smallville, the tone of the film completely changes. It's very, like, homegrown, heartfelt, and dramatic.
Yeah, it's very Rockwell-esque in its depiction of 1960s Midwest America.
The fields are golden and the skies are blue, and there's just a great atmosphere to the whole thing.
What really struck me in a lot of these scenes is the camera work, that they were able to really sweep the camera along these vast expanses because they had the space to do so out in the fields.
Right. And it really makes you feel like it was a place where a guy like Superman, a guy with such strong values, would have grown up.
Well, I mean, according to 70s depictions of family values.
It's just really wholesome.
Yeah.
And I totally believe that a guy who came from there would feel totally comfortable using words like swell and golly.
Yeah, would totally grow up to be a guy like Clark Kent, who completely contrasts with the world of New York/Metropolis.
As we're seeing a young Clark Kent, not only do we get these majestic Midwestern panoramas, but we also get ones from the Arctic. Those were beautiful. I can't believe those were done on a soundstage.
Yeah, the Fortress of Solitude was just amazing.
I want to live there. I want that to be my home.
I don't know where you would put your furniture, but
the crystals are the furniture.
How did this not win for set design? Holy shit.
Exactly. Like that alone, that set alone should have ensured a nomination. And the fact that it still feels like it could be like real alien architecture totally sells it.
Yeah, totally. Alien, yet not totally out of the realm of what could happen in nature.
Exactly. It feels organic. But after Superman goes on his, like space odyssey, that's when we get to Metropolis. Now, Metropolis comes with a completely different feel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a comic book world right there.
It's the opposite of the Fortress of Solitude. There's people everywhere, noises everywhere, and it feels very much more a comedy adventure. We get introduced to characters like Lex Luthor and the Daily Planet staff, and they're all just these interesting characters that Clark interacts with.
And Clark himself becomes a comedic character.
He does. He absolutely does.
Yep.
These are the few moments where I would say they didn't take the comic books seriously, but then again, comics were kind of goofy around this time period as well.
They had a good setup. They had a great foundation from which you could like branch out into these other areas. If you didn't have that serious foundation, the whole latter part of the film would have been probably too comedic in feel.
Too campy. Yeah. The whole film would have been just too campy. But it's great that Christopher Reeve, like as a character, as an actor, was able to play like both sides of it.
Yeah, absolutely. He was campy, but also earnest.
Christopher Reeve is the perfect Superman and Clark Kent. Like, as much as I like Tom Welling, Brendan Routh, and Henry Cavill, like, Christopher Reeve is Superman. The dichotomy in his performance between Clark Kent and Superman is like a masterclass in technical acting.
Yeah, it's night and day.
Just what he does with his voice and his posture, it's really cool to watch. There's always like the joke that like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that people don't know that Superman is Clark Kent.
Yeah.
But here in this film, you could believe it, for one, because Superman is still new to the scene. Not too many people have actually seen his face. And Clark Kent,
Yeah.
But also, yeah, they act completely different.
Yeah. Superman in the comics must be as good of an actor as Christopher Reeve was.
Oh, yeah, he would have to be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Character arc-wise, Clark is kind of static in the film. When he's young, he's just kind of like on a mission of self-discovery, trying to figure out who he is, why he's there. It's the question he asks to Jor-El, like, who am I?
Right.
And it's kind of the question that every young person has.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the Clark Kent alter ego to Superman, is that it's a jumping on point for people to relate to.
Yeah.
When he grows up, Clark Kent's arc is kind of all about fulfilling his father's plan for his life. Like, Jor-El definitely had a destiny, an idea of what the life of his son would be on Earth. It's really
And
just
kind of what it would have to be given how powerful he was.
Exactly.
It could have gone two ways. He could have let the power go to his head, or he could be an inspiration for mankind.
A light, as Jor-El describes it.
Yeah, Jor-El's damn lucky that Clark happened to crash on the Kent farm.
He could have crashed in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, who knows? Red sun.
But when it comes to that arc for Superman, it kind of makes him reactionary, right?
Yeah.
He's just responding to various crimes and things he encounters in Metropolis.
Yeah, I think the last bit of character development we get from Clark was when he admits to Jor-El that he kind of got carried away that first time he debuted Superman, and that he enjoyed fighting crime, basically. That was an interesting bit.
It is a really interesting bit, and I think a critical bit. It happens like almost at the halfway mark of the film.
Yeah.
And what's interesting also is that was not in the theatrical release. That's only in the special edition.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was so important because that's when Jor-El gave Superman the lesson about vanity. Basically explaining that he has to stay humble because if it were not for vanity, then Krypton would probably still be around. What an important scene that was cut.
Yeah, it's a huge scene. It's also when he implores Superman to have an alter ego, giving him the twofold reason of that he can't save everyone 24 hours a day.
Yeah, because mankind would rely on him too much.
Yeah, that was a great line when he was saying how, like, humankind kind of takes advantage of its resources.
Yeah.
But also the other reason for the alter ego was that bad people would realize the only way to hurt him was through his loved ones. It's a really important scene, and that scene in particular is probably the main reason why I like the special edition over the other versions of this film.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like the last moment of character development we get, up until I think the very end. Superman is reactionary until he chooses to disobey his father Jor-El about not interfering in human history.
Right, and he turns back time.
Which is kind of a weird arc.
It is.
There were no consequences to it.
Yeah, for as many warnings as he got throughout the film about doing what he did, it ended up being the right call, I guess, because he got to save Lois. As opposed to, what would actually happen if he turned the world around the other way, which is, you'd have tsunamis on every single west coast on Earth.
But I think thematically, there should have also been more dire consequences to not listening to his father, who, is essentially God in this storyline, like thematically.
Yeah, as an analogy. Well, initially in this script, this film did lead to the release of Zod from the Phantom Zone, right?
Right, exactly. I think the behind-the-scenes production turmoil is sort of why this film kind of got botched thematically. Because the original ending for this film was going to be that he takes one of the Lex Luthor nukes into space, lets it explode, and that shockwave happened to free General Zod and his two partners from the Phantom Zone.
Right.
That was the consequence of disobeying his father.
But it should have been a consequence of messing with human destiny.
Honestly, if you think about it, I guess you could consider the consequences being that all the people in the damn spillway area all died. Because if he saved Lois, he didn't have time to save them.
Right. Yeah, I guess Superman kind of let those other people die in order to save Lois instead.
Which is weird. They don't address the fact in any way. I think they're kind of hoping the audiences just kind of ignore that.
Because it ends up being a real selfish decision on behalf of Superman.
Exactly.
But let's not think about that, though.
Yeah, no. No, actually, the reversal of time thing was actually shot as the ending for the sequel. Because in the sequel, Zod was going to destroy the Earth, and Superman had to turn back time to fix the damage.
Oh, wow. Wow. Fucking WB always messing up the director's visions.
No, it was the
movie.
producers. It wasn't Warner Brothers.
Whatever.
It was the producers. They weren't attached to Warner Brothers at all. But it's interesting because it's such an iconic kind of moment.
The time reversal?
Yeah, exactly. It's like something that you could only do in a Superman movie, right? He's just so powerful that story-wise to them, it kind of fit as a solution.
Yeah. I'm surprised he never did it again in subsequent movies.
No, he was too busy throwing like cellophane S-shield emblems that would trap people, weird superpowers like that. Despite the story faults, I still love Christopher Reeve, and I was so heartbroken when he fell off his horse and became paralyzed. To this day, I refuse to ride a horse because if a horse could break Superman, I'm not going near it.
Yeah, don't fucking trust him.
Nope, not at all. Moving on to Lois Lane, Margot Kidder, the actress who played Lois Lane, she never hit like the same iconic status that Christopher Reeve did for me personally.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say why. It's just like when I think of Lois Lane, I don't think of Margot Kidder. I mean, she definitely has like the spunk that Lois Lane should have.
Yeah.
But that also sometimes comes across as grating.
Yeah, a little bit. It's almost like he fell in love with her just because she was there.
Right? Yeah, like we never really understood why he fell in love with her specifically. Was it just because like she sat across from him at the office?
And he was holed up in the Fortress of Solitude for years upon years and just missed the sight of a woman and so fell in love with the first woman he saw.
There you go. As a character, though, also she came across as really, like, she didn't give a shit about Clark Kent.
Right.
But around Superman, she was like the thirstiest woman ever on screen.
Yeah, that scene when she interviews Superman was, I guess, more uncomfortable for me now than watching this film as a kid. Because I could just see the horniness between the two.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
all that direct eye contact, and all the innuendo where she's like, how big are you?
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
She might as well have asked him, like, if he was circumcised or something like that. I mean, she asked him if he was married. She asked him, like, if his bodily functions worked.
Yeah. She asked him what color her underwear was.
Yeah.
I was like, damn. She was laying it on thick, but Superman was all about it. Just like
Oh,
this.
he rolled with it for sure.
Oh, yeah.
He was even, like, smiling to himself.
He's a baller. For this being the first woman that he's seen in how long, he certainly had a whole lot of game. And I guess, he would. He's Superman. He has all the confidence in the world.
He has super game.
That being said, I do think that the two actors had great chemistry.
Well, I think it's pretty well known that's why she was hired. Because there were a ton of women who auditioned for Lois Lane, like, famously. And, there were a ton of guys who auditioned for Superman as well. But Margot Kidder said, like, her strategy going into the audition was to come across as though she was just completely in love with him.
Yeah, it was a good move. Because I totally believe that in this film. I think the most endearing part about her character was the comedic value that she brought to the film. She was comedic relief in a good way, not so much like the Otis and Miss Tessmacher way, kind of, which I found a little bit too bumbling and stupid.
Yeah. Let's talk about Lex Luthor. This film makes me hate Gene Hackman, like, as a person.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Like, both he and Marlon Brando were big movie stars when this film came out. Like, Gene Hackman had just won the Academy Award when he was cast.
Oh, really?
And I guess,
what? French Connection?
I think, yeah, The French Connection. And both he and Marlon Brando were reportedly pretty difficult behind the scenes. Like, Hackman didn't want to shave his head for the role.
Ugh.
So they had to write in that the character wears wigs.
Stupid.
And, like, Hackman, he just played him, like, campy and, like, just, like, annoyingly arrogant.
Couldn't Hackman have just worn a bald cap if he didn't want to shave his head?
He refused to. He didn't want to wear the bald cap. In fact, they had to talk him into doing it for the final scene when he pulls off his wig.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, know who you're playing. Like,
right?
This character exists in the comics.
Yeah, just a lack of respect for the source material right there.
And I think I would feel better about him if he actually gave, like, a good performance. But he didn't really. In fact, I think he's, like, the worst part of this film.
I mean, I wouldn't say he was not charming, but he's not the Lex Luthor that I knew. He kind of took the role in his own direction, it feels like.
And of course, this was before the 80s where, Lex Luthor was kind of established as a businessman, a business mogul.
Oh, yeah.
In the comics. But, like, before that, he was like a mad scientist kind of character. And they didn't even go that route with him in this movie.
Do you think this movie inspired the business mogul type aspect of the character, or do you think that was just a product of the 80s in general?
I think it was a product of the Reagan era and like the rise of corporate greed.
Oh, yeah. But even Hackman was better than Ned Beatty and Miss Tessmacher, who I don't understand why were in the film.
It does seem strange that Lex Luthor, would surround himself by complete idiots.
Yeah.
He says that line, I think, verbatim in the film to begin with.
Multiple times. Maybe it implies just some sort of like insecurity where he doesn't trust anybody who might question his authority.
I could buy that. I could totally buy that.
Who is Miss Tessmacher? Is she Lex Luthor's girlfriend?
I have always kind of had the theory that she was his wig maker.
Oh, really?
Because she wears several wigs in this film as well.
That's right. That's right.
And that's really like the only thing I could think of because they never explain who she is. She wasn't a character from the comics.
Right.
And neither was Otis. So I'm not sure why they were written in. I don't think they were written in by Mario Puzo because there were several rewrites later on after his first treatment to add more humor to the film. So I think other writers did that, and I hate them for it. Miss Tessmacher, especially, I think she just seems so questioning and not loyal to Lex Luthor.
Uh-huh. And she turned out to betray him.
There's a scene in the extended edition where it shows what happens with her. Lex Luthor like almost kills her.
Oh, wow. Holy shit.
But in the other editions, it's a thread that's kind of left dangling because you don't see her go to jail along with Lex Luthor and Otis.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I assume she escaped, is what I'm led to think.
Now, the last character I want to talk about is Jor-El, played by Marlon Brando. Now, I'm not sure if Brando still has the record, but at the time, he was paid millions more than any other actor for only 12 days of filming. And he was contracted almost 12% of the box office profits.
12%?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Was it worth it, you think?
Yes. I think he was just phenomenal in this role.
It was good to see him at the very start of the movie. His approach to the character just elevated the entire proceedings.
Absolutely. Now, as good as his performance is, that's not to say that like there weren't drawbacks to having him cast.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to be in the film. Like even after he was cast, he only wanted to do voiceover work. He wanted the writers to make Jor-El, quote unquote, a suitcase or a green bagel.
What?
Yes.
The hell does that mean?
He figured that because it was an alien, that he didn't need to actually be present for the filming.
Ugh.
Lazy ass motherfucker, Marlon Brando, for sure. Donner had to actually educate him as to the fact that this character was one from the comics and that readers of the comics knew what Jor-El looked like and knew that he wasn't a green bagel.
A green bagel? Dude was crazy. Holy shit.
For sure. And I mean, he's always kind of been notorious for refusing to memorize lines. He always puts like cue cards in strange places, like tapes them to like other actors' shirts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he'll just like look around in strange places. And that's sort of the charm of Brando's acting is that he takes long pauses and he always kind of looks around. It works here, but like, I guess he placed like cue cards like on baby Kal-El's like diaper and just like, it just strange places. But again, unlike Hackman, I think Brando gave a great performance.
It was kind of brilliant in how subdued it was.
He totally brought like that caring, wise mentor quality to the role. He sort of fulfilled that archetype for the hero, that mentor archetype.
Yeah. Let's get into the story highlights.
So the film begins with the trial of General Zod, Ursa, and Non, who are being sentenced to the Phantom Zone by Jor-El.
This was a really cool scene. I mean, it really has no bearing on the rest of the film. It's really just set up for the sequel.
Exactly.
But I think Terrence Stamp gave a great performance. Marlon Brando gave a great performance. It was really cool to see him give like these closing arguments in this trial.
Well, he establishes himself as like an authority figure.
Right.
In this weird, intriguing scene that's kind of going on with this crazy architecture. It was just a really interesting way to start the film. I do wish they would have gone a different route with the Phantom Zone, though.
I actually think it was pretty brilliant in concept, but it was a strange execution, I think, in how this mirror in space just happened to be floating by and then they got captured in it. I don't think that was from the comics, right?
No, it wasn't.
I think it was an interesting creative choice.
There's actually a few things here that weren't part of the comics that were also kind of creative choices, like the crests, the emblems that the council wears on their chests.
Yeah, they were like family crests or something.
Yeah, no, that was established in this movie. Jor-El in the comics never wore any kind of crest, except for like a sun kind of symbol, but it wasn't like the Superman logo.
Yeah, that was pretty cool because it made Superman's uniform, in essence, a family heirloom, kind of.
Exactly. So Jor-El warned the council that Krypton was going to explode. They ignored him. So he and his wife Lara send their baby Kal-El into space while Krypton is destroyed, which is kind of a horrifying sequence.
It really is.
So we follow the ship through space until it reaches Earth, crashes into Smallville, where it's found by Jonathan and Martha Kent.
And they were cool. I love Jonathan and Martha Kent in this movie. They just, I want them to be my grandparents. You know, they're just so wholesome and wise and caring.
Well, Glenn Ford, he was a pretty established actor at the time as well. The actor who played Jonathan Kent.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was important to have an established actor because when he dies, like you feel it.
Yeah, it's really sad.
The actor who played a young Clark Kent, actually his voice was dubbed over by Christopher Reeve. The voice you hear there is Christopher Reeve's voice.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And he also had to wear like prosthetic makeup to make him look more like Christopher Reeve.
Well, I could tell he was wearing a hairpiece, but I didn't know that was Christopher Reeve's voice.
Yeah. When I learned that, I had to go back and watch those scenes again. I was like, holy shit, it is. He's such a good voice actor. He could play like a young version of himself pretty well.
I thought it was cool when young Clark kicked the football. You would think that the football would just explode, though, right?
That was a cool effect, and so was him running alongside the train.
That was less cool.
I thought that was cool.
No, it was a little cheesy. It was a little fake looking. Like, the way that actor moved his arms is not how somebody moves while they're running.
I run that way. So Jonathan Kent dies, and Clark follows the call of a special Kryptonian crystal to the Arctic, where he creates the Fortress of Solitude. While there, he meets the Jor-El hologram, and then he goes on this 12-year interstellar, sixth-dimensional odyssey across time and space, learning the total accumulation of all knowledge spanning the 28 known galaxies, and learns why Jor-El sent him to Earth, and that he's forbidden from interfering in human history.
And then he flies for the first time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, once he comes out of like this odyssey again, he's fully clothed in his Superman uniform and then just like takes off for the screen. I'm sure that was really cool in theaters when I saw that for the first time, especially with the music.
Yeah.
So by now, again, we're an hour into the film and we hit Metropolis.
What is the runtime of the special edition?
It's actually only 10 minutes longer than the theatrical version, and it's 2.5 hours.
Okay.
It's a long movie, and you definitely start to feel it towards the end. But by this point, like, things are still changing enough where it's still pretty interesting. It doesn't feel like it's long.
Yeah.
So at the Daily Planet, we meet Lois Lane, we meet Perry White, and Jimmy Olsen. In Metropolis, we also meet Lex Luthor, his henchman Otis, and Miss Tessmacher. Superman saves Lois from a mugger, and then later on from a helicopter crash.
I really love the mugger scene. Just how weaselly and weak Clark Kent looks, but deep down, he's secretly the ultimate badass.
That is definitely one of my favorite Metropolis scenes, hands down. The helicopter crash scene is also another really good one. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was funny when he went looking for a phone booth, but, the phone booth designs were more open in the 70s.
Yeah, so he used the revolving door instead. And that moment where he catches her, and then he catches the plane and how it matches with the music, it was so perfect. It was just so well done. I would have been standing up in my seat cheering if I saw this in theaters back in the day.
Yeah. Again, there's a reason this film was nominated for Best Editing at the Oscars. After he saves Lois Lane, he goes on like this crime-stopping spree. Like he stops like a jewel thief climbing up the side of a skyscraper. He stops these bank robbers from getting away on a boat. He saves a cat from a tree. That is a funny scene. So because of all of this, the world learns of Superman, including Lex Luthor, including, everyone in Metropolis. Lois has an interview with Superman where he takes her like on this flight across like the eastern seaboard.
Yeah, I think it heavily inspired a whole new world in the Aladdin movie.
Yeah, I mean, like Lois Lane, Princess Jasmine, they're both wearing like blue, billowy outfits. Of course it did.
Yeah.
After this, Lex hatches a plan to stop Superman and enacts his own plan to hack nuclear missiles from both the Army and the Navy. Lex Luthor lures Superman with this high-frequency like radio transmission and puts him like through this gauntlet of like bullets and fire and ice. That's a deleted scene. That was not in the theatrical cut.
But that is by far my favorite scene of the entire movie.
Not only is the cinematography really good, but it really like is a good display of Superman's powers, I think.
Yeah.
In the theatrical cut, like when Superman like spirals down into the sewer, like right after that is the scene where he's like knocking down the steel door.
Oh, okay.
which is where he meets Lex Luthor and where Lex Luthor manages to trap him with a kryptonite meteorite after revealing like his master plan of knocking the west coast of the United States into the sea.
Did you ever quite understand how Lex Luthor was able to deduce that kryptonite would have adverse effects on Superman?
No. It's something that I've never really been satisfied with in the comics either. They've come up with a few reasons for why remnants of Krypton have become irradiated, but they absolutely didn't give any reason in this film. His whole deduction that it would be lethal to Superman was very convenient.
Yeah, it was very glossed over too. But lo and behold, it is, and he manages to form a necklace out of it, made with a chain that he puts around Superman and then dumps him in his pool.
Of course, Ms. Tessmacher helps Superman escape so that he's able to stop the missiles, fix the fault lines, save all the people, but Lois dies.
So then he turns back time to save Lois and not the people.
Well, at least not the people who got washed away in the Hoover Dam flood.
Why would you build a town at the base of a dam?
The scenes where Superman is like underground and it's like all orange and red and there's lava and he's like fixing the fault line.
Yeah.
That wasn't in the theatrical release either.
What? Well, how did he fix the fault line in the theatrical release?
I think you just see him like pushing it up from above the fault line.
Oh, interesting.
I thought those were pretty cool scenes.
That was a really cool scene.
It's like a creative visualization of what that would look like underground.
And it just makes him look like such a badass too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like he's Atlas or something.
Yeah.
So Superman, he finds Lois. She's dead. He gets like scarily upset by this. Like he just roars as he like flies into space.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to fuck with Superman when he's that angry.
Nope. He flies around, spins back time, saves Lois, as we mentioned. After that, he imprisons Lex Luthor and Otis. And we get the big reveal that, hey, Lex Luthor is bald.
It's about time.
And then we see Superman in space, and he smiles at the camera.
I really like how Superman Returns kind of revisited the ending sequence that all these Christopher Reeve movies had.
Yeah, it's kind of iconic. Like, every Superman film should end that way.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Man of Steel sort of had something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't the end of the film.
No, but he did fly around in space toward the end.
Yeah, and that was cool. So again, the film did get kind of hard to watch towards the end. There were a lot of dangling threads, a lot of missed thematic arcs, but overall, you just can't walk away from this film without loving it.
It's really hard to fault the movie for its faults because of its successes and because of what it inspires.
And also, I think they managed to craft a pretty decent story where, like, the faults that you do find with it are pretty, like, nitpicky.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the story and of how, inspiring it is and how good the cast is. And just visually, the film is just so beautiful. I'm giving it 4.5 stars.
It's near perfect. I would definitely agree with that. Some people might even give this film 5 stars, and I would totally see where they're coming from, too. It could be argued that this is the greatest superhero movie of all time. And for a few decades, it really was.
It's definitely the best Superman film of all time.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. The other sequels, I feel, don't even really come close to it. I think the closest Superman movie in terms of quality was Man of Steel.
Quality-wise, you could probably also say Superman Returns, but that has its own problems.
True.
We'll get around to reviewing that film one day too. But that's it for this review. Let us know what you think of Superman the movie by reaching out to us on social media, either on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or you can email us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, if you visit our website at dynamicduel.com, you can get links to all of our social media links, as well as a link to our merchandise store and our Patreon. Again, if you guys join our Patreon for just $2 a month, you get access to hours of bonus content that comes out every month. And there are other tiers that let you request custom duels and give you executive producer privileges.
Our next episode will be a duel episode. We are going to be pitting Orion against Silver Surfer.
I've been looking forward to this matchup for a really long time. I can't believe it's taken us this long to get to an Orion Silver Surfer duel, but I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, both of those characters sort of have like thematic ties to Superman.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a decent tie-in to this episode. But after our Orion versus Silver Surfer duel, we're going to be reviewing the film Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer.
And I've only seen that film once. I barely remember it, so I'm actually kind of looking forward to watching it again.
It's not as bad as the other Fantastic Four movies, but it's not a great movie. Silver Surfer himself is actually pretty damn sweet in it. Galactus, not so much.
We'll talk all about it during our review of that film.
So lots to look forward to in the upcoming weeks.
Thanks to our executive producer, John Spees.
And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Up and away.
True believers.